Hello and welcome to SNAN's third session of the Career Development Workshop. In this session, we're going to cover resume review. We'll be joined by an HR professional today who's going to share her insights with us about what happens behind the scenes, and we'll make time for you guys to ask all the questions you have today. So hopefully you came up with some good questions. Before we start, we would like to emphasize that if you'd like to stay engaged with us, uh, our website, our LinkedIn, and our Instagram are on the screen. So you can join us. And I'm also excited to share that we have announced our career fair date, which will be hosting at SANC. The official date now is October 5th, 2024. And again, this will be a great opportunity for you guys to network, listen to some speakers from the industry, and then view some of the job postings, the job listings. And obviously, we're going to have complimentary LinkedIn headshots for those who attend. Again, my name is Arif Ibrahim, and I'm hosting this session with Ala Suleiman. Today, we're going to have a special guest, and then we're going to utilize the breakout room or stay in this room to answer a lot of your questions. We have a special guest. With no further ado, it's Ala Yunis. I'm going to pass it to Ala. Ala is a HR professional, and she'll be here to help us address a lot of your questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Arif and Ala. I'm truly honored to be here today to speak with all of you for this fantastic resume workshop, which I'm understanding is part of an ongoing series. I think it's an amazing opportunity just to get those experiences and just to these resources. So I love this. As Arif mentioned, my name is Ala Yunis, and I'm excited to share just a little bit about my background, my experiences, and how I got to where I am today. But more importantly, I want to ensure that by the end of the session, you feel confident to ask any questions you have and really just see me as a resource you can turn to for guidance if needed. So just to start off a little bit, I originally grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, but made my way out to California in 2021. Visited before, but I've never lived here. So it's definitely been a really great experience. Before moving out here, I completed my studies at Kennesaw State University, where I got my bachelor's in human services with a minor in international affairs and my master's in conflict management. You may be wondering how I got to the HR career, but it's definitely has been a journey kind of getting here. But in between my bachelor's and master's, took some time. It took a year to be a AmeriCorps service member, which I always say was a pivotal moment for me in my life and career. For those that don't know, AmeriCorps, it's a federal program that assists and engages individuals in public service work with the goal of improving communities. So I was able to do this during that time. I was able to have the privilege to work in the nonprofit sector, which gave me that hands-on experience. But after graduation, I took all of that and came out here and was able to start in the human services or the HR kind of field. I think the next slide. Perfect. So during that time, that 7 years working in the nonprofit sector, it was in a variety of ways, different communities. A lot of my experience was with the refugee resettlement community or with the refugee community in Clarkston, Georgia, where I was able to provide employment services for adults. And I worked with children in schools from elementary all the way up to high school. I also spent 2 years working in sports-based youth development, teaching social emotional learning skills through sports, which is ultimately what brought me out to California. When I first came out here, I worked in a sports-based nonprofit out here, which I absolutely loved. But ultimately changed over to my current role with Affirm as a global mobility specialist. So in this role, which I'm more than happy to answer any additional questions, but just high level, really facilitating any cross-border transfers. So I assist our employees if they're wanting to relocate. We're in 5 different countries right now. So if they want to relocate from the US to Canada, the UK, Spain, Poland, any of our other entities, being able to get into the small just those details, making sure that when they do relocate, whether it's individually or as a family, they're able to resettle in their new country. Also advising and reinforcing global policies. Of course, we live in a global world, a remote world now, where a lot of the work that we do is across different time zones, across different countries. So just assisting in drafting some of those policies and reinforcing them. Being just a strategic partner, I think just cross-functional work, being able to work from people on the tax team to payroll to really compensation team. You learn that HR is a huge umbrella, and within it is a lot of different roles, and ultimately just supporting employees throughout just in the day-to-day work. Slide. So I wanted to keep that part short, but I'm more than happy to answer any additional questions on my experience or my current role. But ultimately today, I hope that the things that we can take away from this is providing feedback and guidance, whether it's on resume writing, job applications, which I understand that the goal here is resume writing, but just providing any type of feedback there, building connections. I'm a true believer that connections are the way to finding your career, finding different jobs, anything. Connections is the most important thing. Offering practical advice. So wherever I'm able to kind of give that, give any advice there, I'd love to do that. Boosting confidence, which mashallah, I'm sure all of the confidence is already there. You just need kind of that support. So I hope I can provide that too. And clarify any career goals. I moved from working with children in the nonprofit sector to now working at a fintech company in HR, 2 completely different things. Originally, I didn't even think that I would wanted to get into tech or into HR. I didn't want to deal with hiring or firing, which is ultimately what people think HR is, but it's just such a big umbrella. So when I was able to get into this, it just truly showed that no matter what you want to do, you're not stuck in your one role. You're able to, it's all the skills that you take from what you're doing now, they're all transferable skills. So I hope by the end of this session, I'm able to help with any of this, and whatever I'm not able to answer, I will definitely make sure to provide Arif and Ala my email, my contact information, so that y'all are able to reach out whenever. But thank you again for having me here today.
Thank you, Ala. Really great person to be around. Ala is very knowledgeable, so make sure that you use your time here to ask her questions. And with that being said, we are going to dive into your questions. Feel free to unmute yourself. You can use the raise your hand feature to start to speak. And if you'd like to share your resume, if you have specific questions, would like to use the space for that. So go ahead. And like you can ask any kind of questions you have. Like it doesn't have to be a resume type. Like Ala is here with all this knowledge, so make sure that you can make use of that. So
And I know I sped by my experience in the not like when I did work in Georgia. So if there's anything I can clarify there, would be more than happy to, or even in my current role, I would be happy to clarify anything there if there's any questions. But I know resume writing is definitely has been even when I was going through it in the early parts of my career, it was a challenging thing. And even now, I think that's something that everyone is constantly working on. So very happy to be here to answer any of these questions.
all right, we got Hassan. Go ahead.
So I guess one of the things that I think is a struggle is like basically getting your resume viewed by HR, right? So we have all these technology systems, these ATS systems. Is there any surefire ways to kind of beat the ATS system, to make sure that your resume gets in front of the hiring manager or HR. Because I generally find that if I get an interview, I can typically get close or if not get the job. So just very curious.
I think definitely a great question. I think the hardest, like you said, the hardest part is getting the resume in front of the hiring manager. And just being able to, because once you get in there, you're able to talk about, your experience yourself. I think in my experience, the ways that has been just the most successful for me, is just making sure, one, knowing if I'm able to find out who the hiring manager is for a specific role. A lot of that starts off if, for example, if you do find the role on LinkedIn, for example, you can apply directly through LinkedIn, but more, what I've seen more recently is people applying outside of that and reaching out directly to that recruiter. Which I don't want to touch too much. I'm sure next week is going to be, I'll have an amazing speaker to speak on that side of the process. But if you're able to get in front of the recruiter, being able to reach out to them, because once the resume gets there, I'm sure you've seen this probably written, recruiters probably spend 30 seconds probably at most looking at resumes. And I think even that, when I first learned it, I was shocked. I was like, that doesn't seem fair. I spend months working on my resume and you're only looking at it for 30 seconds. So one, just making sure that within your resume, you have those catcher words, those words that kind of pop out in your resume, and making sure that when they see it, they're like, okay, well, this is definitely something that stands out. This is something in the job description. They also have it in the resume. And I know that was a long answer, but ultimately I would say the number one goal, if you are able to find the recruiter, being able to reach out to them after you apply. If you have contacts at a company, whether it's somebody you went to college with or something, reach out to them. I think we're all trying to be here helping each other out. So if you know someone, even if it's not a close person, reaching out to them saying, hey, I applied. Is there any tips that you can provide? Do you have a contact with a recruiter? So I hope that helped provide a little bit of guidance there.
And line with that, like, like, how would you advise someone to find the hiring manager? Like, if you found a
The
job,
hi-
yeah, like, how would you find the hiring manager?
The hiring manager, oddly enough, more recently, they're putting the recruiter. Hiring manager, each company is different. Sometimes the hiring manager is more towards the last step of the process versus the first person you're going to talk to is a sourcer or a recruiter. Those are the people that are going to be looking at the resume itself. So depending on the company, a hiring manager may not be the first point of contact. So wanting to see the recruiter first, but a lot of times they will have the hiring manager's name listed on the job description. I've seen it definitely on LinkedIn, directly on the company website. It does not typically have the recruiter or hiring manager on there. It just has the job description itself. So even looking on LinkedIn, if you see the company, see who's a recruiter they are on LinkedIn. I utilize it so much. And then from there, reach out to them if you're able to get a contact there.
What I was hinting at is like, back to your point that like, it's about the people, right? So, because like, if you're targeting a company that someone works at that company, then internally they'll be able to see who the hiring manager is. Right?
Yeah, they would be able to see the hiring manager and who it is, and also be referred to as well. So, for example, if you apply to a job currently here at firm, I always like to tell people if they do, let me know. Not only would you put a recommendation in, but if I can let that person can let a recruiter know, say, hey, I have this person that's applying. Can you push that resume to the top at least, or if not the top, at least like put more emphasis on it, because knowing someone, connections is a really, really big kind of thing that helps. It's not the only one, but I will say it's a big tool there.
We got Amani next.
Hello. Two questions. I guess I'll follow up to Hassan's question first, and then I have my own question. So let's say you don't know anyone at that company, and you find the recruiter and you reach out to the recruiter. What would you be saying? What would you say?
It can be as great question. Nice to meet you, Amani.
Hi.
I think it could be as simple as introducing yourself. Hi, my name is Amani, and I recently saw that you opened up a role as, as a resource or as a coordinator. I recently applied and wanted to see if there is any additional information I could provide. Attach your resume just so they have it in the tool that they, whatever portal they use, but send them your resume again. Follow up with them, because it just makes it easier because now your name is now at the top of the list. So something as simple as, hello, this is what I applied for. Here is my resume. If there's any additional information I can provide, more than happy to do so. So I would keep it nice, short and sweet, but definitely a great question.
Hmm. Okay, and then my question is, so um, how do I like explain like a gap in career, but also like if I took a job that was like a lower level than what I was doing before, and but because you said people only look at the resume for like 30 seconds, so I'm trying to like putting the best foot forward, but the most recent experience isn't necessarily the highest thing that I've done.
No, it could be. So there's a lot of ways that you could, I think, do this. In the gap in if there's a gap in your career, it could be something as explaining, being very honest and explaining this was for personal reasons. I think that's just the most honest way of doing it. But more so highlighting what you have done in the past, putting that towards the top of your resume. And one thing that I've also seen is instead use those grabber words in order to highlight what you've done. So instead of, for example, saying something like, I just have customer service skills, you could say something like, I delivered exceptional customer service by resolving this percentage of problems on the first contact, resulting in X percentage of customer satisfaction. That's a very specific, very broad answer, but I think everything that you do, everything that's in your resume, you can always tailor it and make it sound, I don't want to say better, but make it sound so that they're able to utilize the skills that you had in the role that you're applying to. So a gap in the resume sometimes can be challenging, but as long as you're able to, one, highlight the experience, put that towards the top of what you've done, the last thing that you've done that applies to what they are asking about, then that at least highlights like, okay, she has experience in this. She understands how to build a process. She understands how to work cross-functionally with other people. These are the things that we're looking for.
Okay, so you would recommend in this case, chronological order probably wouldn't help me as much.
I don't think it would hurt, but yes, I wouldn't go towards it exactly. If there was another way of putting it, because I think now resumes have changed so much across the years of how to format them. So in the sense, I wouldn't say chronological order would be the most beneficial. So being able to highlight the things that you have done most recently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then one last clarifier. So when you said just be honest that the gap was for personal reasons, so like in like a summary statement.
You could say call it, I've seen people say something as personal sabbatical. I took a break to focus on personal development, family care. You don't have to get super in detail because they don't need to know about it, but I've seen personal sabbatical as an example. So that just makes it sound a little bit better of like you just took some time for yourself. Of
Okay, thank you so much.
course.
I'm just quickly gonna add on, Amani, correct me if I'm wrong. I think she was asking where does she add the part about personal sabbatical on her resume? Is that correct, Amani? Like, would that go under her summary? Like, because usually, yeah, once you get to the interview, you can talk about the gap. But since your first introduction is through your resume, is there a way to explain this personal sabbatical in your resume, or should you not mention it like in your summary or objective, you know, that paragraph at the beginning sometimes you have? I don't, Amani, that's what I understood from your question, and I'm curious about the answer too. So yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice to know as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, great clarifying question. Thank you. I wouldn't necessarily, and again, I think everyone will provide different types of feedback. I wouldn't necessarily put it in the objective part, but Eve, you could add it into the work experience part. So when you do put your job, I've done this from this year to this year, you could say personal sabbatical 2020 to 2024. And within that, just a short thing, took personal development, took some time for personal development. There's a variety of ways to do that. So you may get advice to say, you don't need to put it into your resume at all. But I've had that feedback as well to say, you can put in the work experience itself, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend to put it into the objective portion of your resume.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank
And I
you.
always like to say to have different resumes, in which you probably all already have, but different resumes for different types of roles, because there may be some roles that you may be overqualified for. And as frustrating as it sounds, you often may not get a role because you're overqualified. So making sure that your resume is tailored to whatever position you're applying for.
Yeah, I was gonna add that cover letters are a good space to have like any of these clarifications. So if the job you're applying for does have a cover letter, maybe you can talk more about your person. So that
100%. Personal cover letters definitely have been, I've seen them go away a little bit more across the years, but the roles that do still have them, it's a wonderful spot, like space to really kind of go into, you know, your experience, what's been happening. So that is also a good place to explain it.
yeah. Chi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, good evening. It's evening from Nigeria here. I wanted to ask about cover letters. Okay, so I've always had these conflicting thoughts about how much should be added in a cover letter. Like since you already have your resume, your resume has like every details you need. So I don't know, do you think it's a great idea to, like, how much is enough for a cover letter? Like, should we talk more about the skills, qualifications and other things, or should I just go ahead and say a brief something pertaining to the job and all that?
Perfect. Wonderful question. I think cover letters is the time where you're able to give specific examples. I think your resume is where you're able to give a high level of, I've done this, this, and this for this many years. But cover letter is the time where you're able to go in and say, I've improved during my time at X company in X role. I was able to improve this, this, and this. This cover letter is where you're able to answer the questions. When you look at the job description, and you look at what they're looking for, this is where you're able to use your skills and go in details. It's really very quick, very concise. Give really 1 to 2 kind of paragraphs to give those key qualifications. So I know it seems like it's always kind of double work having your resume and your cover letter there, but the cover letter is there definitely to give those couple like 2, 3 examples most to say, okay, well, we're going to be able to use this skill, this thing that she's done, that they've done to kind of bring it to this current role or our company. I hope I understood the question correctly, but please ask me again if not.
Okay, yeah, it's okay. You did. Thank you.
No worries. I don't mind reframing it if I misunderstood the question.
Oh, okay. Is it okay if I ask it again?
Please, please do.
Ah, network. Okay. Yeah, she did. It's okay. Yeah, are you there?
Oh, please do ask it again. I wasn't if I misunderstood it, but definitely please
No,
ask.
no, no. It's okay. It's okay. I don't need to ask it again. Yeah, I'm perfectly okay with the answer. Thank you.
No worries.
I think we have a question in the chat from Ala. Ala says, what about a fresh graduate who still has experience or has not completed university? Do you mean someone who doesn't have experience, Ala?
Do I know? You said, do I know?
The person in the chat's name is Ala, so it's funny. We have three Alas on the call.
Too many alas today. Maybe ala, if you can unmute yourself, if you can, or just explain your question again. Add more detail.
And then meanwhile, others like this is your time. If you have any question, like literally, like even about how to dress for the interview, like feel free to ask it. There's no such thing as a wrong question, so make sure. You got a hand up, Hassan, let's go.
Yeah, so I had a question around length of the resume. So you know, when I first, made a resume, my recruiter told me your resume be one page and fit everything on one page. But I think, as you gain more experience, that becomes harder. But they pointed out like, okay, if you're less experienced, do a functional resume, which will take like at least 2 pages. What do you think is kind of the standard nowadays? Is it okay to have multiple pages for your resume? Or should we stick to like kind of the standard of like one page?
I think that's a great question. I think it's very, as you said, it's challenging to stick to one page, especially as your experience, you get more experience, you have more opportunities. It's hard to do that. I would say as you're applying to roles, you can try to limit it to one page, but I'm a person, if you have to go into a page and a half or two, I think two feels like a lot. So you don't want two full pages of your resume, but if you're able to kind of tailor it to a page and a half, and this is where you're able to either take away maybe roles that may not be as applicable. If there's something for those that are recent graduates or that are still in school, or more so that are recent graduates, you may not need to include college kind of activities in there if you have the work experience. So being able to pick and choose what's on there. But I have seen that there are still a page and a half, because as you have a lot of if you have different roles, it's going to be maybe 2 pages of your resume. So I think I've seen a little bit of both, where people are able to do it in one page, but it just is very challenging to highlight all the things that a job will need to see. And this is where I guess the cover letter can come into play. You can add additional kind of information in there, but I've seen that it has been perfectly fine where it's a page and a half in your resume, if possible. I hope that answered the question there.
Yeah, I would say don't apply to a job with like a 4-page resume.
Oh yeah.
And Nur, but before that, like one thing you can do is they create like a portfolio or something, like a presentation. That's something we'll talk about next session. Where you can, like tell them about your other experiences, even though they may not be relevant to the role, but like in a way that's, like that's appealing, right? So you use that storytelling magic.
I actually really sorry to just add to piggyback onto what you just added there, the portfolio. And this is something that I used to think that was only available for certain fields. If you're showing a project, if you're showing, something that you built, if you're in the engineering side, in the marketing side, that's the only time you can have a portfolio. But if you do have that time, if you have the resources, if you have people in your network to help you, no matter what type of field you're in, I have not done it myself, but I've had peers that have done this. If you're in like the humanitarian field, if you're in that field where it's not necessarily you're building something from scratch necessarily, you can still have a portfolio. And this is definitely a great way where you can showcase what you've done. And to a question that was actually asked earlier of what you can send to the recruiter, this would be, if you do have a portfolio of website, this is where you can send that to the recruiter as well, because this just gives them a holistic view of who you are. So that's another thing that you can send to the recruiter, just so they have all that information with them.
I know Alnoor had his hand up, but Ala, we'll go back to Ala's question. Ala mentioned like, how would you write a resume for someone who doesn't have like experience, never worked before? So like, what would you have on that resume?
Can I ask, do you have experience in like whether it's school, any clubs that you have been a part of in that sense? Could I ask if there's some experience there? Oh, sorry, I didn't get to read the chat. If there is an answer in the chat.
No, there's no answer in the chat, but would you give like something generic, like say for like a fresh grad in college, and you can speak on your experience, as a fresh graduate back then, like you did face some challenges, and you may have had peers who didn't have like internships or anything like that. So like, how did you or your peers kind of position yourself in a way to be hired?
Still starting off with, you could still have a very strong resume. Let me start by saying that I hope my original question did not make it seem like that. If you've never worked or anything, you can still have a strong resume. But here, this is where you want to focus on the transferable skills, your relevant experience. And relevant experience does not just have to be your work experience. There can be a variety of things. This is where you can highlight educational achievements. So if you're like looking at formatting, it could be at the top, you have your objective statement. So this is where you're summarizing the career goals, why you're even applying for the position that you're applying for. Underneath your career goals is where you focus on education. The difference here for someone that may have a little bit more relevant experience, if they've been in their career a little bit longer, they typically will put their education maybe towards the bottom. They want to start with their experience first. Whereas here, because you're a new grad, you're wanting to highlight your education first. So this is where you list your most recent education. You can also include your GPA if you'd like to, or academic honors, awards. You can also, I've seen it where people highlight relevant like casework that may be aligning to the job that they're doing. So that's where you can highlight it there. Underneath your education, that's where you go into your skills, focusing on like some of these soft skills that you definitely have, that you've gained throughout that time: communication, teamwork, problem solving. You can also include hard skills, if you're coming from school, Microsoft Office, we've had to build PowerPoints, we've had to be in Excel, we've had to do all of this. This is where you can put some of those hard skills. Social media, I think we're all in social media. I think we can all call ourselves social media experts at this point, marketing experts. So this is where you can highlight those skills. And then underneath your skills, this is where you go into your volunteer experience, extracurricular activities. So there's still definitely ways that you can highlight your experience there. If there's also, I want to add, if there's any projects that you did that align with the role that you're applying for, this is where you can apply for you can put some of those projects in the resume as well.
If you haven't done any projects, go ahead and do so, because it's not that hard yet.
There's always a way. There's always a way that you can utilize the, the skills that you have and put them in there. That is what I've learned. Reframing has been the key word of my career. Reframe everything.
Feel free to add any more questions in the chat. Meanwhile, Noor, go ahead.
Hello, hello, how are you?
Hey.
Yeah, I just want to ask you something, but I think it will for the next workshop in interview strategy. But I have to ask you this one because since you are HR, and so I need to ask you this. When I get into interview, what exactly I should do inside the room, and normally what they are will be looking for, or how can I know what they are will be looking for?
Great question. So I would say one thing is preparation and confidence. That is the biggest thing, because at the end of the day, the person asking the questions, all they know is the resume that you have provided them and maybe the cover letter or whatever that may be, but that is all they know. You are the expert in everything that you've done. So making sure that you prepare, you exude confidence. As I always like to have my resume on hand when I'm going into a interview, so that I'm able to go back and say, okay, this is what they're going to be asking about. This is where I can provide some extra, kind of context there, and make sure to take your time. Take your time with everything that you're kind of hearing. If there's a question you need them to ask again, have them ask it again. Because for them as a recruiter, when they're asking these questions, and again, I'm sure the next workshop, they'll be able to go into detail about this, but they're going through a list of questions that I'm sure that they're asking all day. So for you, if you need that moment to be able to can you reframe this question? Or I've seen it where I personally have asked, could you give me an example of what you may be asking for? For me, it was a very specific case where I just needed an example of what they were looking for. But take your time and be confident in yourself, because you deserve the job that you're applying for. You're just there to showcase and let them know that this is why you're there. Because the thing is with interviews, they're trying to see if it's a good fit for them. But more importantly, I always like to say, is this a good fit for you? Are they a good fit for you? Are you going to want to be there? So if there's any questions that you have of them, to ask about values of the company, then you can ask that. So I would say always arrive a little bit early, whether it's a Zoom call or in person. Be confident, have a paper and pencil ready to write out any questions that you may have, and come with questions. Always come with questions, even if it's 3 to 4 questions. It may sound silly, but I even will write out a question. I may already know the answer to it, but I want to make sure that they know that I'm listening, that I'm engaged in it, and review their website. I know that sounds like a very silly thing to do, but make sure to review everything in their website, that you're familiar with the company itself, because you'd be surprised to see how many people will show up to an interview and know very little about the company that they're applying to. So I hope that answered that question as well. But please let me know if I can add some more to it.
Thank you very much.
I want to say these are wonderful questions, by the way. And again, if there's anything that I can provide any additional clarification on, please let me know, repeat the question. Sometimes I'll hear one question one way and answer it in the way that I think I understand it. So please repeat it if needed.
Thank you, Ella. Guys, keep your questions coming.
I have a question actually, can jump in. I think it's a common question that many people, including myself, when I was looking for a job, that I kind of, thought about. I think looking for a job is it's an ordeal, finding the right job, and it's a full-time job in itself. Usually when you have a job and you're looking for a job, it just becomes very overwhelming. And there's so many, tips and things like that that are out there. But being in HR, being in that field, can you share any secrets that we may not know? Like, what are some things that people should like look out for that may not be thinking about? I know we talked about, like using the right keywords in your resume so that the tracking system picks it up. But that's still kind of like common knowledge. I'm curious if you know anything as an insider in HR, like what are some things that people are just not aware of? Like, most people that you apply miss certain things that if only they did it, it would have increased their chance of getting that interview, right? I think like Hassan mentioned earlier, getting to the interview is the hardest part. Like most people, once they get to the interview, they're able to talk about themselves and all their accomplishments. But getting to the interview seems to be the biggest struggle for many people. If you have any, we would love to hear any, yeah, things that we may be missing or the public is missing.
No, that's a wonderful question. I agree. The job application process is frustrating. It's can be very defeating at times. And you may find a role, say, oh my goodness, this is exactly, I would be a perfect fit for this. I do this every day. You apply for it and they go another way. I think the biggest tip, like the two biggest things, and I'm sure as soon as I say it, you all will be very familiar with it. The one is connections in a sense of networking events. I think probably probably 90% of the jobs that I've had in my career have come from networking events. Being able to go to these mixers, being able to talk to people, because at the end of the day, you never know who you're speaking to. People can give all the advice on have a great resume, make sure that you do take these certifications, make sure that you have the highest degrees. But at the end of the day, it's the people that you know. And I know as you hear that, it sounds frustrating because even when I was hearing that, I was like, well, I know people and I still don't. I'm still not getting a job. I'm still not getting interviews. But when you go to these networking events, talk to people, let them know, this is, if you're a recent graduate, I recently graduated in software engineering, and I've been able to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm looking to branch out into these types of roles. And I've had it where I promise you, I went to an event one time. I always like to give this example. It was after I graduated, I took a few months to not apply for jobs to just relax. And this particular day, I was sick. I had lost all of my debit and my credit card. So in my pocket, I probably had like $10. And I was like, how am I going to pay for parking in Atlanta to go to this event? And I went to the event. I found parking. That was my luck number one. The table that I sat at a table with an executive director that I knew her because I had applied to about a few roles when I was in college, and she didn't know me. And after the event, I went up to her, I introduced myself. I said, hi, my name is Ali Yunus. I'm a huge fan of your organization. I see that you've done, you do these types of, at the time it was a girl running group. You do these races, you've done this. It's just an amazing thing. And let them know that I see you, I know who you are. So networking events is a huge thing and would be number one. And the second one is a question that was asked earlier of when you're reaching out to recruiters, reach out to these people. If you can find a name, reach out to them. I don't want to say email them every week, but definitely get your name in front of their faces, because recruiters look at hundreds of resumes every day. And so you want to make sure if there's another way that you can get into their face and email them, say like, hey, here's my resume. If there's anything else I can provide, please do so. So the two things would be networking and just being able to make sure that your name is still top of mind. I think besides the other things that you all, I'm sure, are already doing, tailoring your resume, and doing everything that you're doing now, continue doing, but networking events is really, really a huge thing. I think I saw a couple of questions in the chat, but I wasn't able to open it yet.
So one in the chat is tips for introverts. these people who have that fear of going out there and presenting themselves.
That is that is definitely a fear. Tips for introverts: keep it short and sweet. Practice. I think this was a tip that was given to me. I'm an extroverted person, even though I need to recharge my social battery. I am an extroverted person at times, but the one thing that a mentor had told me is before you go to that event or before you go to, you know, wherever, whatever it may be, practice in the mirror, making sure that, you know, whether it's like, hey, this is my 30-second elevator speech, you know exactly what you're about to say, so you don't have to veer off, and listen more than talk. I think I'm a person, I had to learn that later in my career because I would always talk and I would listen to respond. But more so when you're talking to people, listen to gain the knowledge. If you have specific questions, you know, have those questions, whether it's in your phone or you write them down, have them so you can stick to that script, and just ask those things. So you're getting more of the knowledge instead of you being the center of attention. Because when you go to these events or these, you know, interviews or something like that, you don't have to be the center of attention. Put it on the other person and see what you can also get from them. But it is a very challenging thing, kind of going, it's scary at times for sure. And also, I like to say people love talking about themselves. So when you go to these events, you ask them one question, they'll go on and on for days.
Do we have any introverts on this call? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Let's face
Introvert.
that fear. Let's face that fear. Did you say something, Hassan?
Oh, I said I'm an introvert.
Oh, okay. But for real
You
though,
don't-
like, this is a space where you guys can practice that. Like unmute yourself and speak right now. Like, if you don't speak usually, speak right now. You're gonna say something. Suleiman.
No, I was gonna say to Hassan that he does not come off as an introvert. I wouldn't have thought. He's been very engaged, mashallah, asking a bunch of questions in all the sessions. Amani says she's an introvert, that's why she's typing her questions. But maybe use this opportunity to maybe unmute yourself and practice with us.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks.
yeah,
It's not so much a fear of speaking, but it's something that Allah said about the social battery thing. Like it just very draining and overwhelming to go to networking events. So that's the thing. But I think like mentally preparing for that helps. And then I like when Allah said to listen to gain knowledge. So I'll definitely be doing that more.
Good. It is. I've gone to networking events and I'm like, this is just so much that's happening. And even as an extrovert, I look at my peers and some friends that have even more energy. And I'm like, I don't know how to keep up with this. But yeah, listening to gain that knowledge. And it's okay to take a step away from some of these things, you know, go get a snack for a little bit and then come back and be like, you know what, now I'm ready. Take a breather, and take that time for yourself, because those networking events, they're for you. You know, you make them what you get what you want out of them. So whether it's just there to just listen, there to ask questions, or there to promote and show who you are. So there's 3 different ways that you can go to networking events, and all 3 ways are extremely beneficial.
So do you have like any specific tips for introverts? I guess I should say I'm more of like an ambivert. I'm like in between introvert and extrovert, but only in situation if I'm in an environment where I don't know anybody, I'm an introvert. I can just sit by myself and never talk to anybody the entire time. So there's like any like conversation starting tips or anything that you recommend given your experience from you know, master networkers?
Oh man, so many. I mean, it depends. I would say if you're going to like a work type of networking event, if you know ahead of time some of the people, this is a tip that I've always also looked at. if you know ahead of time, maybe some of like the speakers or the attendees, seeing like what they've done, you can say like, hey, Ala, Arif, I see that you are a part of Sync. I'd love to learn a little bit more about it. So putting it on them and seeing like ahead of time what research you can do before then. And I always find even when I go to some like any type of event, whether it's like a social or a networking event, finding like if there is a group of people there that whether you know or you don't know, if there's something about the story that's being said or talked about that you find interesting, asking follow-up questions. I always like to say that's the cheating and the easy way out of being a part of the conversation without having you being the person to really drive the conversation, is just asking the question. Be like, really, can you tell me more about that? Because it can be really scary at times, especially if you don't know anyone. I think it's okay to acknowledge that and to admit that this is something that is outside of my comfort zone. But I think going outside of your comfort zone in a safe way for sure is a way for you to build that confidence to be in those different rooms. And I love that you clarified that you're kind of in between extrovert and introvert. I think a lot of us are moving towards like are in that in-between phase. And I think the pandemic really kind of did that to a lot of us, of having to relearn how to socialize with people. So I think that's definitely something that we're all trying to do. And at the end of the day, I always like to say that everyone is trying, we're all kind of going into things wondering, how should I act? What kind of questions should I ask? I think everyone is thinking probably something very similar, and that helps me. I'm like, I'm not in this by myself. But even just some of the questions that you've been asking and coming off from you, I would definitely think that you're more extroverted. So I appreciate all the questions that you've been asking.
Thank you. But honestly, when you just mentioned that, I thought of something else, right? Me being somebody who is, like I said, I'm an introvert in like new environments, new situations. Bringing somebody that you know with you to a networking event, something I don't always think about. But yeah, I think that would also be good for any introverts as well.
100%. If you can bring someone, if you can drag a friend, a family member, just let them know you're going to be my person tonight. That's a great thing to do as well, if you have that option.
What if you guys are both what if you both are introverts? Then you end up sitting in the corner of the corner.
Hey, if you're both introverts, then you have to push each other to be introverts, but in an extroverted way. Yes, Amani, it's definitely easier together.
I was just gonna add something real quick. I think, just from everything that I've been studying and learning, all of these things like extroverts and introverts, sometimes even when we tell ourselves these labels, we limit ourselves and our abilities. And the reality is, yes, a lot of us have tendencies to be an extrovert or introvert. It's easier for us to keep to ourselves or like recharge alone, or it's easier for us to recharge with people. But the truth is, all of us or most of us have the ability to step into the other side. And that's kind of part of the personal growth. Like, I know for me, when I was in college, I hated networking events. I was like a drag for me. Maybe I was more of an introvert at that time. But I had to kind of push myself because it was what you needed to do in order to get a job. And so, like, I had to like reframe my thought process in terms of I can be somebody who's social when needed. You know what I mean? So like kind of like stepping into a different version of who you are, because we all have the ability. Very few of us cannot, but we all have the ability to kind of like lean, they say lean into the discomfort, right? Because these are the goals that you're not achieving because you haven't done something different, right? So you have to do something different in order to get different results. So I would say like it wasn't easy for me. It's still sometimes a struggle. Like sometimes like someone mentioned, sometimes I'll go to events and I'm just like, I'm in a good, like I want to talk to everyone. And sometimes I'm just like, no, not today. Today's not happening. I don't want to like, it's a lot. It takes a lot of my mental and social energy. But if you need to, you can step into it, build that confidence. As you mentioned earlier, I think we talked about preparation. The more prepared you are, if you have your elevator pitch ready, and if you just don't think about the outcome, right? Like we don't control outcomes. You control what you present and what you bring in. So you're gonna go in, you're gonna do your best, and that's it. You're gonna leave knowing that you've done it, you're given it your all. So just don't limit yourself by labeling yourself, because you know that you can always step into one or the other. And I know it's easier said than done, but everything is better with practice. I don't believe practice makes perfect. I think practice makes better. So the more you do it, you get closer and closer to the results that you want. Inshallah. Just a quick nugget.
Awesome. Those of you guys who haven't spoken today, would love to hear your voices, but no pressure. Uh, if you guys have questions, please keep them going. Otherwise, we're going to cut it short. Give you guys the rest of your day back or evening. All right, going once, twice, thrice. Thank you guys. You've been a wonderful crowd. Appreciate seeing you today. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Ala and Ala. You guys are amazing. Love working with you guys. You guys feel free to reach out to any of us. We're accessible for LinkedIn. I will share our emails by email with you guys. I'll send up a follow-up email with Ala's and my email and Ala's email. If you guys have any questions. That being said, I'll let you guys go for today.